I am Neil.
I'm Veronica. We fell in love when we were 16, and here we are talking about what life is all about for us. Thank you for joining us.
This is a Life Is podcast with Neil and Veronica. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Life Is with Neil and Veronica, and we hope that you are having a great week so far, where today I wanted to take some time and we are wanting to talk about something that we've maybe interjected a little bit here and there in our previous episodes that we've done. But I want to take some time specifically to talk about life is about energy. And when I talk about energy, I'm really referring to about the types of energy that people and relationships and the maybe thought processes that people give off, including ourselves. Because I do know that when we were in the episode Life is Hard, I had, slightly mentioned about having the hard time or it being hard when somebody is maybe has a negative energy or they have what we call an energy vampire. And it could be hard to maybe distance yourself from that relationship because it could have been something that you've been avoiding for a while. So, Veronica, I know that I've also talked about your energy because that's something that I know that I have loved from the beginning 21 years ago, that you just have this positive and welcoming energy that I know everyone that comes across you has said to you. So when you hear about life is about energy, what maybe comes to your mind at first thought?
At first thought, I don't even know what I would say at first thought. I'm glad we're spending some time talking about this. So I'm glad that you chose this as one of the topics for today's episode. Randomly, I'm going to start off by saying that those of you that are tuning in, if you're not watching, whenever Neil says hello, I do this furious wave at the beginning because I'm really excited to be doing another episode, but nobody can ever actually hear it. So when I think of energy, there's a lot of different buckets that come to mind, and you already mentioned it. So number one, definitely I feel like energy is a resource, and it's a very valuable resource that we have. I feel like when we talk about life is about integration, we have to kind of figure out where we want to pour our energy into. And that can be whether it is the task at hand, whether it's things throughout the day. That's why we talk a lot about the 3 things for the day. But also, as you mentioned, it can be with relationships, it can be people, and it really can be generally just how we kind of exist in a sense, what we want to be like. Right off the bat, something that came to mind and something that I learned that honestly blew my mind. So I think it's undeniable, right, that we have our own energy, we give off our own energy. The whole synchronicity thing is just so fascinating to me. And also, though, that, I think we can all think about the people that we have in our lives, the relationships that we have in our lives, where some fill us up and some deplete us. And, it's not saying that it's at the fault of whoever might be on the other end necessarily, but sometimes energies just don't match up. And I felt that. I think you felt that. But going back, Squirrely Veronica is ready to go back to the original thought. Especially when you're like, what is the first thought? I'm like, ooh, is there ever a first thought, to be honest? But something that I learned that really blew my mind is, you hear about all the time, speak loving words to the plants. Here we go again with plant analogies. And honestly, to everyone listening and watching, we really don't have that many left in the home.
Not anymore. No.
We've pared down. We've done which ones bring me joy and which ones need to live in other homes. And if Melanie is listening or watching, she is the plant nurse, ultimate. She must speak loving words to the plants, which we are about to talk about. But that's something that I've always heard. And never really understood, but it's something that people talk about a lot. Plants will grow more if you speak loving words to them. Well, at a training session, both in Vegas and just this past weekend, there are, I guess, these two experiments. I don't know the names, not very scientific with that. We can look it up, post it somewhere. You can look it up. But there was this experiment, and honestly, like, I had to take a second. I'm like, no way. Like, that you can speak either loving words or like super discouraging, almost hateful words to water or to apples. That can be then like the water was frozen and then they looked at the patterns of how it froze. Okay, I know. Don't tune out yet. For anyone that's listening, like, don't turn this off if you're like, all right, what are you getting into here? Because I had to like take a step back and just like, I think my jaw hit the floor. Same thing with apples. I don't know. There was, a set of apples that they spoke really loving words to, and another set of apples that they spoke like horrible things to. And in both cases, like, you should see the patterns or like how the apples ended up browning. And I feel like we need to try this. But yeah, like, I know, I feel like you probably have a reflection on that, because when I talked to you about that, you're like, oh, I've heard of that. And I feel like this is an opportune time for like the Neil wisdom that I am so like, I feel like so grateful to hear like day in and day out in our home, for it to like come out in this podcast.
Yeah, when I heard of this experiment, and I guess it's a pretty well-known experiment in some circles, and I came across it maybe a few months ago, and everything that we do as people, as humans, has energy to it, right? Like, we emit vibrations, right? Like, I'm not scientific, like we've said before, but there are proof in science that we do emit certain vibrations and give off energy. And so there was somebody talking about it, much smarter than I think he's a physicist, I don't remember, but he's saying that everything we do and everything we think either gives off energy or draws in energy. And I refer it to as like a thought feeling cycle, where when you think or say something, right? So this is going into the manifestation or like dreaming big, right? When you say things out loud, when you think things and you live it and breathe it every day, those thoughts put out energy into the world. Okay, it emits that energy. And then when you start to see that come in, it produces feelings, which draws in more energy, and it just cycles through. And it goes back into putting out negative things, right? If you're putting out negative things like they do in these experiments, it's going to draw, and put that into other people and bring back negative feelings. And it's kind of hard, obviously, when you're in that, to break a negative cycle. You have to be pretty aware of what you're doing to stop it, or you have to have a conversation with somebody. But yeah, there's really scientific proof, and I will be sure, and you will be sure, to post something after this episode on our social media and Instagram, just showing these exact pictures, because when you see them, then you'll realize that there's actual proof that what we say, what we think, what we do emits energy, positively or negatively.
That's incredible. When you said that too, I was just like, whoa. I feel like I definitely needed like some time to just like absorb that. But we started this podcast in December, right? So it's been just about, what are we at now? Like a month and a half? I don't even know. I've lost count of how many episodes we've done. Again,
7 weeks. 7 weeks. That's okay.
And ever since that, So thank you to everybody that's listening, that's tuning in. It is some really neat stuff that's happening, I feel like, too. And Neil was just mentioning, I don't know when you want to share it, anyways, in terms of some milestones that have been happening with the podcast. But, we have these conversations all the time. I love our conversations when we have them. I mean, this is a little bit different because I feel like you have to go to another room and I have to go to another room just based on like the open concept of our home. And just to make sure from the podcast perspective that like it's as engaging as it can be for anyone that's tuning in and watching, because otherwise I feel like you'd kind of watch us like sitting and just staring at each other and talking and having this kitchen conversation. But it's really solidified for me. I feel like the whole dreaming out loud and seeing things out loud. And wow, I feel like exponentially, just even in the past month, a lot has changed, which is really incredible. So, in thinking about what's to come, I know in the episode that we were talking about, dreaming big and like, how does that feel when you are at that big dream that you will talk about and that, that you have? It's just, it's the 1st of February today when we're recording. So of course, the release schedule is a bit different. But so I feel so much energy already, and I feel very fortunate to be surrounded by amazing relationships that fill me up, that I get to spend a lot of time with. And I will say a big percentage of that is virtual. I mean, it goes without saying, I get your energy, obviously, in person and in my life. And I'm so grateful for that. And I think it's evident of like the amazing energy that you bring into my life. And, when we're doing our videos and everything, it does not go unnoticed. That's for sure. But every day I'm like, how lucky am I to come across this community that fills me up? And I was just saying, even to one of my friends today, that winter can be really hard for me. And this is, I think, one of the first winters where I have felt a lot of lovely energy to kind of get me through those times where it can be really difficult too. So I am learning, and I think by your amazing advice and your amazing encouragement constantly of where I can pour my energy into, where I can focus my energy, because we have choices. I think with our energy, there are conscious choices that we can make. And we get to decide where we get to pour a lot of energy into. I mean, definitely, I really dislike making generalized statements because I feel like everybody is in a different scenario. So again, even when we talked about life is hard, baselines are different, circumstances are different, everyone's life is different. But, for the most part, we do get to decide a large portion, I think, of the energy, where we're going to put it, where we're going to spend it. And a lot of times where, I'll rewind way back where it was very easy for me to spend a lot of energy on, number one, things I could not control, right? Number two, on things that honestly didn't deserve my energy, because my energy is worth something now, I've realized, right? And I think a lot of that is in part of your encouragement again. But now, okay, so, we talk about a lot like feel the feels, those are valid. But then there's a point where you're like, okay, I'm going to move on because the energy that I have, I'm going to pour it into something that really matters. And that's a habit that I feel like that I'm personally getting much stronger at now. And again, thanks to you. And I don't know if you've noticed that, or, and again, I think that that's one of the things that we have to keep telling ourselves is like, whoop, like that's something that I feel like I've gotten really good at in terms of pumping the brakes on, in a sense. Like sometimes we have, for me, again, like Neil and I are not scientists. Do I go down the rabbit hole of looking things up and, do I love evidence-based things? Yeah, absolutely. But again, like these are like our kitchen conversations in a sense where, we take bits and pieces of what we love. We feel like what we want to apply. We share what we think would be very helpful for others. Oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. Where was I going with it?
That's okay, but I guess I'll pick up where you were talking a little bit about like your energy, right? Because I know you've talked about protecting your peace, right? And I think that part of protecting your peace goes into the two resources that are most important, time and energy, right? Time and energy are something that you have to hold on to and really be conscious of what you're doing with them. So I know the thought came back to you, so I'll let you take back over the thought there.
Well, it did. And I think when you think of energy as well, right, because it is a resource that we have. And in any situation, in any day, that can change and shift. And we only have so much that we have that we can give, or again, what that looks like in terms of that resource. So I think, when you think about your energy, it's so important, number one, to prioritize yourself, right? So we're coming back to, myself, my health, my wealth. And I think it's a matter of respecting yourself and, prioritizing it. But the thought that I was trying to get to before, when I then lost track and I was like, but we're not scientists, is what I like to say, that we have like these highways, I feel like, in our minds where, time after time after time, for me, if I'm used to, going down a thought process of whatever that might look like, now I'm saying, like, that's when the demolition needs to come in a sense. That's where you need to, get rid of that highway and blaze new paths of thinking, because I definitely was that person that always spent a lot of time in those buckets that did not serve me, and I was always prioritizing others, but in a non-productive way. So I think, there is energy that you can give to others. There are ways that you can prioritize the loved ones in your life, but in a productive way. So I would spend a lot of time in what are others thinking of me? Do they like me? Like, what can I do to please everybody else around me? And you've always said, like, Veronica, you're spending time thinking about things when like other people are probably not even thinking about that. And like hours, days, weeks, months, like I would have a visceral reaction sometimes of overthinking a situation, or even trying to predict a situation of like something that might happen. So
I've definitely seen a big change once you focused on protecting your energy, and really where that's directed. And it made me think of a few things that we've changed. One, and this goes into the energy of your environment. We've talked about this plant analogy again, where if you're not growing in the right environment, you don't blame the plant, right? You have to blame the environment it's in. You need to change it, right? So same goes for the energy of what we're into. And one of the things that I'm laughing because we used to watch certain types of TV shows before we had kids, and they were, okay, it's just an energy of like anxiousness and an energy of like of the unknown, right? And so Veronica would sometimes be a little bit jumpy,
a little
have racing thoughts in her heads about certain things based off of what we used to watch.
It's an understatement.
So, when we cut that out, and I said, okay, we gotta stop watching this because it's affecting you. And lo and behold, when we cut that out, your energy shifted to being a lot different. And for those of you watching on the YouTube, Veronica is having a laughing fit because she knows exactly the situation I'm talking about. And the other part that we've changed too is in regards to like the news cycle and what is being fed to us and what is being our environment of information, because, you know, you obviously have to at some point realize that what is being told in the news is there to sell certain things and to create certain reactions. And you need to protect, everybody needs to be able to protect what they see and hear. And sometimes the news is just not for everybody. And, you know, Veronica, who has a thought right now, has, you know, I've sort of been the filter for our relationship because I don't maybe react to certain things the same way she does. So I know my energy, she knows hers. And so I'm there to say, hey, here's what's going on. Because if she were to be 24/7 constantly scrolling or seeing things, it's going to cause certain energy shifts in her. So those are two things that, talking about energy, made me think of our past situations that we've altered. And I think that goes into what you've just talked about in your change and shift of your energy and what fills you up.
Mm-hmm. Well, we spent a lot of time in this episode talking about the energy that goes out, in a sense, and being around different energy. But that's interesting because I feel like what you were just mentioning, there's also like the absorption factor, right? So I feel like if you want to talk about that, I feel like I'm definitely more porous in a sense of, wow, like, yeah, it's true though. Like I can be very affected of like absorbing different energies and things like that. Like, you know, and I think, you know, we've heard analogies about introvert, extrovert, all those different things, all the different hybrids. And I mean, I think it does come down to a lot of like energy and how maybe you're affected by that. But I can be depleted really quickly, like really quickly. And I had to laugh a little bit about, like, I didn't even realize like the shows that we were watching, like that was a massive understatement. I feel like you were very kind in how you just told everybody about how I would react. So now, for those of you watching, Neil's the one having the laughing fit, talking about it and thinking about it because, wow, you know, actually, I don't even know if that was intentional or not, or where we just kind of shifted the focus again. So I don't think we ever said, I mean, maybe you did say at some point, Veronica, we need to stop. We need to stop.
I did say that once. Yeah. And that was it. Okay. We cut it off. Yeah.
And, but you know, there's no shortage of things that you can kind of choose to watch, like you said. And I mean, I love Pixar movies. So, but I remember, you know, we'd be watching something and I would obviously get like so sucked into it. And then afterwards I was like, can we please put on some like really happy animated movie? Because yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it started when I was at a very young age and, you know, I was exposed to watching like Chucky and Aliens at the age of like, I think 5 or younger. Not good. But no, seriously. So we would make these choices and watch these shows. And I remember like the doorbell would ring and I would be so jumpy. I think I even shrieked one time and like, oh my goodness. And Neil was like, Veronica, okay, do you think that somebody, you know, if they were trying to hurt you, like would they actually ring the doorbell? And I was like, hey, well, let's not go down another thought process here. But like, yeah, I mean, did you not see that episode where so-and-so rang the doorbell and then something happened? So, oh my goodness. But I'm glad that we made the conscious decision to not do that anymore because it's true. I mean, my thought process around that definitely has shifted.
Yeah. There are times too when we're watching like maybe a movie and it gets to be intense. You're like, I forgot to breathe. You're like, it is just like, it absorbs you so much that your body, in whatever happens, you forget to breathe for, you know, 5 seconds. But you're like, okay, I can breathe again because that scene's over. But that's just the way your body reacts. And you know your energy. And you, like you said, you've made the shifts. And I think it's interesting because, you know, you're talking about introverts and extroverts and energy, right? Because this I can refer to because I do know it. So Simon Sinek, who is obviously a very well-known person, talks about introverts and extroverts, right? And the difference between them and their energy. So he has the analogy saying that introverts, who are you and I actually, we're both introverts start with, let's say, 5 units of energy per day. And every time they see people or interact with people, it slowly takes that energy and depletes it until there's nothing left. And so extroverts are the opposite, where they start at a level of 0 and being around people, that fills them with energy until they get to their certain level, right? That's the analogy. And so it made me think of, like, if you consciously know you're one or the other, are you going to pick people that deplete that energy reserve quicker? Or are you going to spend your time with people that slowly chip away at that because they're like-minded and they're, maybe they only take a little bit away, and by the end of the day, you don't feel as depleted. And that energy cycle that you go around, right, as introverts, or if you're an extrovert, you're going to find people that pour quicker into that energy cycle that you have.
And that reminded me of, when you talk about being depleted more or being filled up more, it reminded me of an image. Actually, Danielle just shared it with me yesterday. And we talk about finances sometimes and you're like, I don't have the budget for that. But this one struck me like so much, I feel like, because it said something, I wish I could remember the exact words, but it's true. There are people that will either fill you more or deplete you more. And, the image said something like, I don't have the budget for like negativity, comparison, like just these traits that you really don't want to be around. Right. And I mean, that's a different conversation in a sense, but we could get into a whole episode for sure about the comparison thing and, all of that. But what is your budget? What's your energy budget? And like, what's your own, but also what are you willing to spend and what are you willing to give? And, what do people have to kind of give you in a sense?
Exactly. And that's like we were just saying all throughout this is, when you think of energy as a resource, when you think of energy as a fixed item that comes and goes, similar to money, similar to your time, you really start to think about where you're spending it, where you're losing it, and where you're getting it from. And the whole energy concept begins to really take effect on your body, hopefully in a positive sense, once you realize these certain resources and aspects that you can, control in most ways.
Mm-hmm. And I think lately too, why there's been a great shift, like even in my own mindset and why I feel more successful with it is just that I think I've had you there along the way to kind of like reinforce things, or it's just reminding myself. And I think it's just being really conscious of it, because sometimes I would come home and you'd be like, whoa, who are you with? What happened? Right. And huge differences for sure. Depending on, who I was around and who I'm spending my time with. And again, when we talk about time and that being a huge resource as well, something that you also need to protect, being conscious of how do you feel around certain people or certain situations or, doing certain things. Because I think, when we get into that cycle, we talked about life is about slowing down. Don't run across crosswalks, everybody. But when you think about that and being conscious of so slow down a little bit and really recognize the energy that you have, how you feel, and, the people around you that fill you up, where it's like a mutually amazing relationship. And when you have the limited time, that's the energy that you want to be around.
Absolutely. And I think that the energy that this conversation and the previous conversations give me and you really just goes to show that, you know, the feedback we're getting, the energy that we have from this community really, you know, it could be, you know, late at night. It could be, you know, the day before we need to make sure it's released. But we always have the energy for these conversations. We always have the time for these conversations because I think it's pouring into what we want to put out in this world energy wise. And so I can't thank everybody enough for letting us know how they feel, how much, you know, one thing has helped them, because that adds to our energy and really makes us feel super good. So I don't want to take up too much more of the time on this episode because I really feel that we've captured exactly what we wanted to say when it comes to life is about energy. And I really hope that after this, there's something that you can take away like all the other episodes. So thank you everybody for your time and your energy today. And we look forward to speaking with you again on Life is with Neil and Veronica. Have a great day.